Hey guys, welcome to AP Biology. We're going to be talking about energy and metabolism or bioenergetics. And I just want to start off with this quick picture right here. This is a picture I took back in 1993 when I was working in Central Africa in Rwanda. And I love it because what it shows is a very large female gorilla and her 1 year old. And these animals are huge. The males can get up to 600 pounds. This female is probably running close to 300, but they sustain themselves on eating a diet of like basically celery. And so they're able to take this very low energy resource, okay, because if you would not do very well by eating celery, and they are able to convert it into their muscle and fat tissues and everything else that they need. Now, they do have to eat a tremendous amount of this material every single day, probably anywhere between 75 and 100 pounds of material every day, and they have these huge Buddha bellies that allow them to extract a lot of the nutrition or the small amounts of nutrition that are in there through processes of fermentation, things of that nature. But just a cool pick. And you'll see another one in our next lecture. So anyways, the overarching concept for this unit is basically, I'll just read it, biological systems, organisms, cells, and organelles are open systems that respond to their environment by managing their energy resources. So let's break this down a little bit. What is an open system? An open system is one where energy is constantly coming in. And that's what we live in. The earth has a constant supply of energy in the form of sunlight. And that constant supply of energy is allowing for the complex systems that we do have on our planet. Okay. And organisms that can take that energy in and utilize it most efficiently are the ones that are going to survive and reproduce at a higher rate than ones that can't. And that's basically natural selection in a nutshell right there. It's all about energy. So by the end of this particular unit, we should understand some basic energy concepts, including the two laws of thermodynamics, or the two that we need to know, understand what a metabolic pathway is, and know the difference between catabolic and anabolic pathways and exergonic and endergonic reactions. Know that ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is the currency of energy that our cells and our bodies and all living organisms, as far as we know, utilize to drive their metabolic reactions. Okay, and what is the role of ATP in coupling catabolic and anabolic reactions? And understand the importance of enzymes in biological systems, which we will go on in lecture 2. So I want to show you this picture right here. This is a very important picture to know. I've seen variations of this picture in multiple questions and FRQs and things of that nature, just done different ways, but you're going to see some variation of organic molecules and inorganic molecules. Again, what's the difference between organic and inorganic? Organic molecules have carbon and hydrogen. They got to have those two things. Okay, as you can see on the left-hand side, CO2 lacks carbon. It is not, lacks hydrogen. It is therefore considered inorganic. Water lacks carbon, also considered inorganic. And so the process in autotrophs, organisms that can basically feed themselves, that's what autotroph means, are able to use light energy and take inorganic molecules and convert them to organic molecules. Whereas heterotrophs, consumers, take organic molecules and in the process of cellular respiration, convert it to inorganic molecules and ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now let's get rid of one common misconception immediately. And that is, many students believe that plants do not have mitochondria. That is 100% false. Plants have both chloroplasts and mitochondria. And I should say not all plants have chloroplasts, because some plants are parasitic, and therefore they're more like a heterotroph. They actually steal nutrients from other plants. They lack chlorophyll. They lack chloroplasts, but they are still considered plants. They probably lost the ability to photosynthesize versus evolving a non-photosynthesizing form. Okay, so do notice energy is coming in the form of light, and energy is going to be exiting this system in the form of heat. Okay, so this is, and also notice the level. This is an ecosystem level. So the amount of energy coming in has to equal the amount of energy leaving a system. Otherwise, you'd be violating one of the laws of thermodynamics. So, what is energy exactly? It's the ability to do work. I like to say it's more of the ability to rearrange matter, just like photosynthesis. It takes inorganic carbon dioxide and water, rearranges it with the input of energy in the form of light into glucose, sugars. Okay, that is work. That is energy. It's created energy. It didn't create energy, it transformed light energy into chemical energy. That's what photosynthesis does. It transforms light energy into chemical energy. And mitochondria are going to convert chemical energy into another type of chemical energy. Okay, three types of energy: kinetic, potential, and activation. This should be just quick review. Kinetic energy, of course, is the energy of action or motion. Potential energy is stored energy, and or the capacity to do work. So, thinking about a living system, a concentration gradient in a cell between one side of a membrane and the other side of the membrane is a form of potential energy, because you have all these molecules on one side of the membrane, and if you can put them through something like a transport protein of some sort, or one in particular called ATP synthase, that movement of those protons through that particular molecule is going to allow that cell to do work. And what is that type of work? It's going to be creating ATP through the enzyme ATP synthase. And don't worry, you will know that in detail. Activation energy is basically just a small amount of energy that's needed to sort of get a chemical process pathway going, or to release the potential energy in a system. So again, here we see the activation. We have the potential energy stored in this bomb. It's that bomb would just sit there forever unless we added a small amount of energy in the form of a fuse that was lit, okay, in order to ignite that bomb. So in this little analogy, the activation energy would be the lit fuse. Okay. In living organisms, it's slightly different. Okay. Let me just move this up here. In living organisms such as this cheetah, the first law of thermodynamics, what does it say? It says that energy is neither created nor destroyed, but can be transformed. So let's look at this cheetah. It's eating an impala. Okay. Well, it's converting the carbohydrates and the proteins and the fats of this impala into, through the process of digestion, into ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's also going to convert it into carbon skeletons, which the cheetah can use to build its own muscles and things of that nature. Okay, where did the impala get its energy from? It got it from the grass. Where did the grass get its energy from? It got it from light. Through the process of photosynthesis, grass was able to convert light energy into chemical energy in the forms of sugars and carbohydrates. The impala was able to ingest the grass, take in carbohydrates and proteins and things like that that are in those plants, and convert it into muscle and things of that nature. It's also going to be converting it to heat and whatnot. And then the cheetah comes along and eats the impala, which has chemical energy in it in the forms of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and it converts it back into cheetah. And that's the first law of thermodynamics. Energy is transformed in multiple ways in this particular picture. The second law of thermodynamics basically says that every energy transfer or transformation increases the entropy of the universe. What's entropy? It's a term that's kind of all encompassing, but it basically means disorganization. It means small, incomplete, things of that. Disorganization is the best way to think about it. So think about a carbohydrate, a complex carbohydrate, or a complex protein. Okay, when that complex carbohydrate or that protein is broken down into smaller subunits, okay, we're going from complex to simple, energy is going to be released in the form of heat. Okay, heat is the lowest form of energy available. Okay, high forms of energy are things like gamma rays and light energy in the form of photons and chemical bonds. Those are high forms of energy. But heat is a very low form of energy. And the universe as a whole is tending towards entropy. So, what's the function of life? I will tell you what life is. Life is meant to fight entropy. Whoops. Okay, that's what life is. We're fighting entropy. How are we doing that? We're getting it by taking energy in the form of food. Okay, and we're using that energy in the process to basically maintain, run, and build our bodies. We're preventing decay. Now, of course, after a while, decay starts to catch up, and that's what aging is. We can no longer fight the entropy that our bodies are going through as much. And so, you guys are in the prime, you're fighting, you're growing, you're developing, and I'm kind of on the down slope of things, and my body's beginning to age, cells are dying, and all sorts of stuff. But you can do things to stay young. So, in summary, the quantity of energy in the universe is constant because remember, the first law says that energy is neither created nor destroyed, but its quality is not. Again, that's the second law. Okay, as energy is transformed and transferred to different forms, it is going to lose quality. It's going to lose organization. It's going to become heat. So, as a whole, our universe is becoming a bigger, because the universe is expanding, a bigger and a colder place. Okay. And the future of the universe is dark. Okay. And eventually it will destroy and start over again. Maybe. I don't know. So, how do we look at this in terms of living systems or chemical reactions? So, remember, chemical reactions are the source of energy for living systems, and they're based on free energy changes. What's free energy? Let's look at this graph. Free energy is the ability of a cell to do work or a system to do work. Okay, so as we can see, free energy increases from the bottom to the top. So a diver standing on top of a diving board has lots of free energy, lots of potential energy, and as the diver falls, he's changing the potential energy into kinetic energy. The amount of free energy is decreasing, as is the potential energy. Same thing with a high concentration of molecules. A high concentration of molecules is a potential, or I should say, concentration gradient, such as on one side of a cell membrane or another. And as those molecules diffuse and move towards equilibrium, the amount of free energy available is decreasing as we go to equilibrium. And remember what I said, what happens when your body reaches equilibrium? You die. Okay? Same thing over here. We see a glucose molecule. All right? All of those atoms bound to each other represents lots of potential energy, i.e., lots of free energy. But as that glucose molecule is broken down into water and CO2 molecules, then we're releasing energy. The amount of energy in that molecule dissipates, and eventually we have very little energy left in these much simpler molecules versus the more complex glucose molecule. Okay, I'm not sure why it keeps on doing that. Again, the portion of a system's energy that can perform work is another term for free energy. All right, so let's look at some of these different types of reactions that we do have. Okay, I'm just kind of moving me around here. Oops, go back. We have exergonic reactions, two basic types of reactions. Exergonic sounds like exit because energy is leaving the system. So an exergonic reaction results with a net release of free energy. The cell loses ability to do work. Its free energy is decreasing. An example would be going from complex molecules to simple molecules. An endergonic reaction is the opposite. We got to put energy into the system, and that's going to increase a cell's ability to do work. An example of that would be going from a simple molecule to a complex molecule. So let's look at some examples. All right, so dehydration, synthesis. Okay, is this an exergonic or a endergonic reaction? Well, let's look at it. We're going from simpler to more complex. We're building, so this is an anabolic reaction. We have to put energy into this system in order to build. Okay, this is an endergonic reaction. Exergonic reaction, again, dehydrolysis, we're putting water in, but when we break this bond right here, we are also going to release energy. So that would be an exergonic reaction, otherwise known as a catabolic reaction or catabolism. Okay, let's look at our reactants with a catabolic exergonic reaction. Our reactants have more energy, our products have less energy. Here's free energy on the left side, progress of the reaction on the X thing. Okay, so this energy difference is the amount of energy that is released. Don't worry about the delta G, but those of you who've had chemistry, that stands for Gibbs free energy. You'll be doing that in chemistry if you haven't had it yet. They've taken that out of the AP Biology curriculum, so we're not going to worry about it right now. Okay, that has been taken out. So energy is released in this particular system. In an anabolic reaction, such as dehydration and synthesis, it's different. We see our reactants with a relatively low amount of free energy and our products with more energy. Well, the first law of thermodynamics says that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, so that energy has to come from outside someplace. And this is the amount of energy that is required. This is an endergonic reaction. Energy is required. So here's my two reactions side by side. Look at now we have potential energy of the molecules instead of free energy. It's the same thing, okay? And we see that this is an exergonic reaction. That's the amount of energy that's output. This is an endergonic reaction, and this is the amount of energy that needs to be put into the system. So let's look at those reaction types in another diagram here. Anabolic reaction, we're taking smaller molecules plus energy to make a larger molecule. Dehydration synthesis, going from monomers to polymers. Catabolic reaction, we're taking a large molecule and we're producing smaller molecules and we're releasing energy and heat at the same time. This is a catabolic reaction. This is hydrolysis. And biological examples of this would be cellular respiration, which is an exergonic reaction. We're taking complex macromolecules, we're breaking them down, and we're going to be creating a smaller molecule called ATP, and in that process also generating a lot of heat energy. Okay? Endergonic reactions, where we're taking simple molecules such as CO2 and water, and using light energy in the process of photosynthesis to build a more complex molecule called glucose or sugars and things of that nature. So those are biological examples of that. Now let's talk about metabolism. What is metabolism? Metabolism is a series of linked chemical reactions, and we can have different types of metabolic pathways, okay? And again, we divide those into catabolic pathways or anabolic pathways. But your metabolism is the sum total of all chemical reactions in your body. That is what your metabolism is. And again, those reactions are going to be both catabolic and anabolic. Every metabolic pathway is usually multiple steps, okay? And every single one of these steps is going to be catalyzed by a specific enzyme. So we start with molecule A. Enzyme 1 is going to catalyze the conversion of A into B. Enzyme 2 is going to convert B into C, and enzyme 3 is going to convert C into D, and that is our product. Okay, that's a metabolic pathway. That's pretty simple. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration are much more complex metabolic pathways. So how does this apply to biological systems? Basically, we need to utilize the energy released in a catabolic pathway to drive an anabolic pathway. Okay, and so this energy released is going to be the energy that we're put into an endergonic reaction. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use ATP. Okay, again, this is called energy coupling, and we're going to use ATP to couple catabolic reactions to anabolic reactions. So here we see the energy from catabolism, exergonic energy yielding processes, are going to drive the formation of ATP. This is, look, ADP plus phosphate. That's an endergonic reaction. Here comes the energy. We're going to make ATP. Now we're going to use ATP to drive cellular work, i.e., energy consuming processes, your muscles moving, the transport of proteins against a concentration gradient, the production of larger, more complex biomolecules. All of those are energy requiring, and that energy is coming from ATP. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. You use your energy, your body's weight in ATP every single day. It's constantly being recycled. Okay. Oops, got to go down here. All right, and here's this. Both of those pictures put together, catabolic pathways are driving this anabolic process, and then we're using this catabolic process to drive cellular work, and that can be a multiple of different types of things. Again, what is ATP? It is a nucleotide, adenine triphosphate. Okay, why is it adenine? Why is it not guanine? Why is it not thymine? I don't know. This is just the way it happened. Okay, it's adenine triphosphate. There is guanine triphosphate. There is thymine triphosphate. There's uracil triphosphate and the cytosine triphosphate. ATP was the winner in the evolutionary process. Okay, but this breaking of this terminal bond releases a lot of energy. Okay, going from ATP to ADP. So how does ATP perform work? It does a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, it drives motor proteins. It drives the sodium potassium pump by causing a conformational shape change. Same thing in a motor protein. When we phosphorylate something, it causes a conformational shape change. When we dephosphorylate it, again, causes a shape change. And we already went through that with the sodium potassium pump. Also, what it can do is take reactions that wouldn't happen without an input of energy and allows those reactions to occur. I think if you click that link on your PDF, it'll bring you to a cool little video. So how does bioenergetics relate to other concepts in biology? It relates a lot to energy flow in ecosystems. Okay, and we'll talk about that in Unit 8, but just kind of talking about it right now, we can see that energy from the sun flows one way through the ecosystem. It's all exiting as heat. Matter, on the other hand, i.e., chemical cycling, the planet only has so much matter. It has to constantly be recycled, sort of like ATP, okay? It's constantly being recycled. And do notice that these squares represent the size of the square kind of represents the amount of energy available in each one of these trophic systems, trophic levels, and you can see it gets less and less as you move up a food chain. In our bodies or within an organism, what you see, we take in our energy in the form of organic molecules in food, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. We digest those. Some of the energy is absorbed. Some of it is lost. Much of it is lost as heat energy. That, again, is our second law of thermodynamics. Okay, we lose some in our fecal matter. Lots of that energy is going to be used to nourish our cells. Okay, some of that's going to be used for cellular respiration to make ATP. Okay, and we're going to use that ATP to make drive all sorts of cellular work. But notice again, we're seeing heat energy being lost at every one of these steps. Again, that second law of thermodynamics. If I could take all the energy lost in feces, the energy lost in heat, the energy lost in urine, and the energy that's inherent within the carbon skeletons that make up the molecules of our body, it must equal the amount of energy coming in. Okay, that's again our first law of thermodynamics, okay, where energy is neither created nor destroyed. So the other concept we want to talk about, again, all biological systems from ecosystems to organisms to cells and molecules are governed by the laws of thermodynamics. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about this little diagram here. This is called the 10% rule or rule of 10. And this basically says that on average, about 10% of the total energy in any trophic level is available to the next trophic level. So what you can see here is that we have 1,000,000 kilocalories of sunlight. Okay, the plants only take in about 10% of that. So that would get 100,000, but only 10% of that is available to the next trophic level. So that is going to be about 10,000 kilocalories are available to the primary consumers. Well, 10% of that leaves 1,000 kilocalories that's available to my secondary consumers. And only 10% of that is available to my tertiary consumers, so 10 kilocalories. And this is the reason why large predators are always rare in ecosystems. The most abundant organisms are going to be your producers, followed by primary consumers and secondary consumers, and then finally tertiary consumers. I will say aquatic ecosystems can sometimes have somewhat of an upside down pyramid, but we'll get into that when we talk about ecology. And actually, we might talk about it in this unit too. That's the rule of 10. And again, we can apply this to a variety of different things, such as a pyramid of numbers. So if I went out, I counted all the organisms that are in a particular food chain, I might see that there's 10,000 freshwater shrimp that are eaten by 1,000, and there's 1,000 of these fish that eat the freshwater shrimp, and there's only 100 perch that eat those guys. Northern pike are large carnivorous fish that eat perch, and there's only 10 of those. And finally, in that particular system, there might only be one osprey, which is a bird of prey that feeds on fish. That's a pyramid of numbers. A pyramid of biomass is basically looking at the entire weight of all of your producers, the weight of your primary consumers, the weight of your secondary consumers, and so on and so on. And that number is also going to decrease as you move up your trophic ladder, so to speak. Well, that's it for that particular lecture, and I hope that helped.